Graham never thought his mornings could feel this overwhelming. The alarm clock hadn't even finished its second ring before two identical voices echoed through the small house. "Daddy! Daddy! We're hungry!" 6-year-old twins, Lily and Lucy, were already bouncing on his bed, their curls wild from sleep and their eyes sparkling with mischief. Balancing work as a CEO and raising two energetic girls on his own was like juggling fire while walking a tightrope. Some days he felt like a hero, other days like he was barely holding it together. But no matter how exhausted he was, when he looked at his daughters, he knew they were his whole world. That morning was no different. Lucy wanted pancakes, Lily wanted cereal. While one dragged crayons onto the kitchen table to finish a drawing, the other had already spilled milk on her pajamas. Graham sighed, rushing between stove and sink, but there was a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Chaos, yes, but it was their chaos. As he flipped pancakes, his phone buzzed on the counter. A reminder popped up. "Dinner at 7. Don't forget." He froze for a moment, spatula in hand. A friend had practically forced him to agree to a blind date, insisting he needed to get out there again. Graham had laughed it off, but deep inside, the thought of meeting someone new terrified him. He hadn't let anyone close since his wife passed away. He glanced at his daughters, syrup already smeared on their cheeks, as they giggled over a crooked drawing of a cat. How could he leave them behind for a date? Babysitters never lasted long with the twins. They were too clever, too mischievous, and too full of questions. Besides, he hated the idea of someone else putting them to bed. "Daddy, are we going with you tonight?" Lily asked suddenly, tilting her head as if reading his thoughts. Graham chuckled nervously. "Well, it's not really a kid thing." Lucy crossed her arms dramatically. "Then it's not a fun thing either." He laughed, shaking his head. Their stubbornness was impossible to resist. And then, like a spark, an idea struck him. What if he did take them? If the woman on the other side of this date couldn't handle a little mess, a little laughter, and two very real pieces of his heart, then maybe she wasn't meant to stay. That evening, Graham traded his tailored suit for an old pair of jeans and a plain t-shirt. No chauffeur, no luxury car, just his dented sedan and two booster seats in the back. With Lily clutching her stuffed bunny and Lucy balancing a backpack full of crayons, the three of them headed out together. His heart pounded as they walked into the restaurant. He adjusted the diaper bag strap on his shoulder, ignoring the puzzled stares from waiters and guests. To the world, he looked like any tired single dad. Not a CEO, not a millionaire, just a father trying to make it through dinner with his girls. What he didn't know was that this simple, chaotic choice, to bring his daughters with him, was about to change his life forever.
Someone else entirely. She slid into the seat across from him, setting her book on the table without glancing at her phone again. "Not exactly the grand entrance I imagined," she joked, her smile awkward but warm. "But hey, you said window table with kids. I figured this had to be you." He opened his mouth to correct her, to explain the mix-up, but then he stopped. He looked at her. Really looked. There was something genuine in her eyes, something that felt safe. For the first time that evening, he let himself breathe. Lily studied her intently before blurting out, "Do you like cats?" Sadie chuckled, "More than I like most people." Lucy slid a purple crayon across the table. "Draw one." And just like that, the awkward tension melted. Sadie picked up the crayon, bent over a napkin, and began sketching. Within minutes, the twins were giggling at her lopsided kitten drawing, completely enchanted. Graham sat back, stunned. What was happening? This wasn't forced. It wasn't awkward. It was effortless. For the first time in years, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, this night could turn into something more than he ever expected. By the time the waiter brought over glasses of water, the restaurant had already noticed them. Couples at nearby tables stole curious glances, some smiling at the twins' laughter, others frowning at the noise. Graham could feel the weight of every look, the silent judgment pressing down on him. He tried to focus on the menu, but Lucy had discovered the sugar packets and was now stacking them into a tower. Lily, meanwhile, was still clutching her stuffed bunny, proudly showing Sadie the crooked ears as if it were a rare treasure. Instead of being overwhelmed, Sadie leaned in, eyes twinkling. "What's your bunny's name?" "Marshmallow," Lily whispered shyly. Sadie nodded seriously. "That's the perfect bunny name. I think Marshmallow likes me already." She tapped the bunny's head gently, and Lily beamed. Graham watched in quiet amazement. Most adults grew restless with his daughters after just 5 minutes. Babysitters gave up, family members sighed and complained. But Sadie? She seemed to sink right into their world without hesitation. A couple at the next table leaned toward each other, whispering. Graham caught a fragment of their words. Single dad, desperate, must be awkward. His jaw tightened. He hated the pity, the assumptions. Sadie noticed the shift in his posture. Instead of calling attention to it, she smiled and reached for the menu. "Okay, girls, let's make a serious decision. What's the best dinner in the world? Pizza, pancakes, or spaghetti?" "Spaghetti!" Lucy shouted immediately. "Spaghetti!" echoed Lily, raising her bunny like a banner. Sadie laughed. "Spaghetti it is. That settles it." She glanced at Graham. "Hope you like red sauce." He chuckled, despite himself, the tension easing from his shoulders. "I think I can manage." The waiter returned, pen poised. Graham hesitated, suddenly realizing how exposed he felt without his usual sleek wallet or credit cards. But Sadie didn't seem fazed. She ordered spaghetti for the girls, a simple pasta for herself, and smiled at Graham until he finally ordered the same. When the waiter left, Graham leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You really didn't have to, stay?" Sadie tilted her head. "Why wouldn't I?" He swallowed. "Most people, they see kids at the table. They think it's too much." Sadie's expression softened, her eyes glancing at the twins, now coloring on napkins with broken crayons. "They're not too much. They're just real. And honestly, I'd rather be here with them than anywhere else tonight." The words hit Graham harder than he expected. For years, he had carried the fear that his daughters were a burden, that their presence scared people away. Hearing Sadie say the opposite, it was like someone had cracked open a window in a room he didn't realize was suffocating him. Lucy waved a napkin with a messy drawing. "Look, this is you." Sadie burst out laughing at the stick figure with wild hair and giant shoes. "Wow, I've never looked better." The twins giggled uncontrollably, and soon even Graham was laughing with them. The sideways glances from strangers didn't matter anymore. At that table, for the first time in years, everything felt exactly as it should. And yet Graham's chest tightened with something new, a cautious, fragile hope that maybe this night could turn into something more than he ever expected. Dinner had barely begun when Graham's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and felt a stab of irony. The woman who was supposed to meet him tonight had sent one last message. "Sorry again. Hope you find someone who fits your situation?" He sighed, shoving the phone back into his pocket before the twins noticed. Lucy, oblivious, was busy twirling a fork in her water glass. Lily leaned across the table, whispering loudly to Sadie, "Daddy doesn't like phones at dinner." Sadie chuckled, sliding her own phone deep into her tote bag. "Good rule."
Phones make people forget they're with real humans. That simple gesture, choosing the conversation over her screen, made Graham's chest loosen a little more. He hadn't even realized how tense he'd been. But just as he started to relax, a familiar voice called out from the entrance. "Graham? Is that you?" Graham froze. Standing near the door was a man in a crisp blazer, one of his business acquaintances, someone who knew him not as a tired dad, but as Westwood, the polished CEO. The man's eyes flicked from Graham's faded t-shirt to the two girls in booster seats, then to Sadie, who was helping Lucy untangle her fork. The recognition sparked in his eyes, but before he could say anything more, Graham gave a quick nod and turned back to the table. "Evening," he said curtly. The man hesitated, confused, then walked away with his date, clearly storing the scene in memory for later gossip. Graham's stomach twisted. The last thing he wanted was for rumors about his personal life to spill into boardrooms. Sadie must have sensed the storm brewing inside him. She leaned closer, her voice soft but steady. "You okay?" Graham forced a smile. "Yeah, just someone from work." She didn't press. Instead, she reached for a crayon and drew a lopsided flower, sliding it across to Lily. "Think Marshmallow the bunny would like this?" The girls erupted into laughter again, and just like that, the tension eased. Sadie had a way of pulling the focus back to the moment, as if the outside world didn't matter. For the first time in years, Graham realized he didn't want to be recognized tonight. He didn't want to be Westwood, the CEO. He just wanted to be Dad, the guy sitting across from a woman who somehow made everything feel lighter. He glanced at Sadie, really seeing her in that moment. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. No designer clothes, no polished nails, just a woman with kindness in her eyes and patience in her smile. And as the twins leaned against her, giggling at her silly drawings, Graham couldn't help but wonder if fate had played a trick on him. Maybe the woman who was supposed to be here wasn't the one he needed at all. Maybe the wrong person had just turned out to be the right one. The waiter returned balancing plates of steaming pasta, setting them down with practiced ease. "Spaghetti for the little ladies and the house special for you two." He smiled politely before hurrying away. Almost instantly, chaos erupted. Lucy's fork clattered to the floor, Lily splashed orange juice onto her sleeve, and somehow a napkin caught the edge of the spaghetti sauce, leaving a red streak across the tablecloth. Graham closed his eyes, bracing for the usual awkward silence or a thinly veiled irritation that always followed when someone shared a meal with his daughters. But Sadie didn't flinch. Instead, she grabbed a napkin, helped Lucy wipe her chin, and said brightly, "You know, this reminds me of the time I fell face first into a birthday cake at the library." Both girls froze, wide-eyed. "You fell into a cake?" Lily asked, half horrified, half fascinated. Sadie nodded solemnly. "It had pink frosting. I came out looking like a strawberry monster. My mom had to wash frosting out of my ears for a week." Lucy giggled so hard she nearly tipped her cup again. "That's so funny!" Even Graham laughed, the sound coming out rough at first, but genuine. He couldn't remember the last time dinner felt so light. Soon, Sadie and the twins were trading stories like old friends. Lucy insisted on telling about the time she found a magic rock in the backyard. Lily proudly explained that her stuffed bunny once saved her from a scary thunderstorm. And Sadie listened to every word as if these tales were the most important in the world. Graham sat back, watching. Usually introducing someone new to his daughters was awkward, forced. But this was different. It was effortless. Halfway through the meal, the waiter slipped a small leather folder onto the table. Graham's chest tightened. He reached instinctively for his back pocket, only to freeze. These weren't his usual tailored slacks. These were old jeans, and he hadn't even checked if he had his wallet before leaving the house. Panic surged. Before he could stammer an excuse, Sadie noticed. Quietly, without hesitation, she pulled out her worn wallet, slid a card into the folder, and handed it back to the waiter with a soft smile. "You didn't have to," Graham began, his voice strained. "I know, but I wanted to. You look like you needed someone to be kind tonight." Her words silenced him. It wasn't about the money. He could buy the whole restaurant if he wanted. It was about the way she saw him. Not the CEO, not the man in magazines. Just a dad fumbling through dinner with two messy, giggling girls. The girls leaned against her, still laughing at her strawberry cake story, and Graham realized something had shifted.
First time in years, he didn't feel like he was failing. He felt human and seen. By the time dessert menus arrived, the table looked like a battlefield. Red sauce streaked across the white cloth, a small tower of sugar packets had collapsed in sticky orange juice, and Lucy had somehow managed to smear chocolate from the complimentary cookies on her nose. The couple at the next table gave them a look of pity mixed with annoyance. Graham's shoulders stiffened. He opened his mouth to apologize to Sadie, but before he could, she leaned across the table, gently wiped Lucy's nose with a napkin, and whispered, "Don't worry. The best dinners are the messy ones." Lucy giggled. Lily clapped her hands. "Tell another story." Sadie grinned, settling back in her chair. "Okay, but only if you promise not to laugh too hard." Both girls nodded, eyes wide. "So, once I was in charge of reading a story to 20 kids at the library. Everything was going perfectly. Until I sneezed so loud that the book flew right out of my hands and hit the librarian behind me in the face." The twins burst into hysterics, doubling over in their seats. Graham tried to hide his own laugh behind a sip of water, but it was useless. The sound slipped out, warm and unguarded. For the first time in years, he wasn't worried about appearances. He wasn't the man on magazine covers or the executive in boardrooms. He was just a dad, sitting at a messy table, watching his daughters glow with joy. And then the unthinkable happened. Lily reached for her cup of juice at the same moment Lucy reached for the breadbasket. The collision tipped the cup sideways, sending a river of orange liquid across the table and straight into Sadie's lap. Graham shot to his feet, horrified. "I am so—" But Sadie was already laughing. She dabbed at her skirt with a napkin and said, "Relax, it's just juice. At least it wasn't spaghetti sauce this time." The twins gasped, waiting for her to be angry. When they saw her smile instead, they squealed with relief and hugged her arms tightly. Graham stared, stunned. Anyone else would have scolded, complained, or excused themselves to leave, but not Sadie. She treated the accident like nothing more than part of the adventure, and something inside him shifted. He realized this woman wasn't performing, wasn't pretending to be patient. She was patient. She wasn't just tolerating his daughters, she was embracing them, mess and all. The noise of the restaurant faded in his ears. For the first time in a long time, Graham felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with wine or candlelight. It was hope. Fragile, unfamiliar, but undeniable. Maybe this wasn't just dinner. Maybe it was the beginning of something he hadn't even dared to imagine. The restaurant had grown quieter as families finished their meals and couples drifted out into the night air. Only a handful of tables remained occupied, their soft murmurs blending with the clinking of dishes being cleared. Graham leaned back in his chair, exhausted but strangely light. For once, dinner with his daughters hadn't ended in tears or frustration. It had ended in laughter. The girls were happily coloring on napkins again, their little tongues sticking out in concentration as they argued over which crayon should be used for the cat's whiskers. Graham watched them with a mixture of pride and guilt. Pride because they were his whole world. Guilt because he still wondered if bringing them tonight had been selfish. He was about to suggest they head home when the waiter returned, placing the leather folder on the table. "Take your time," he said politely, before walking away. Graham froze. His hand instinctively reached toward his back pocket again, but deep down he already knew. No wallet, no sleek platinum card, just empty denim. His pulse quickened, his chest tightening with shame. Sadie noticed immediately. Her eyes flicked to his stiff shoulders, his clenched jaw. And without a single word, she reached into her worn leather wallet, slipped out a card, and tucked it into the folder. She handed it to the waiter with a calm smile, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Graham's head snapped toward her. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered, his voice rough with embarrassment. "I know," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But I wanted to." His throat tightened. "Sadie." She held up her hand gently. "Don't make it about the money. It's not. You looked like you needed someone to just be kind." For a moment, the noise of the restaurant faded. Graham stared at her, stunned by the simplicity of her words. Kindness. That was it. Not pity, Not charity, just kindness. He could buy the entire building if he wanted to, but none of his wealth could buy what she had just given him. The gift of being seen. Not as Westwood, the CEO splashed across magazines. Not as the untouchable man in tailored suits. He was just a dad, fumbling through
seats and spilled juice, trying his best. Sadie turned back to the girls, smiling as if nothing significant had happened. She broke a breadstick in half, handing one piece to each twin, then started telling another silly story about how she once lost her library card 3 times in 1 week. Lucy laughed so hard she nearly fell out of her chair. Lily leaned against Sadie's arm, her stuffed bunny squeezed tightly in her hand, and Graham sat there, watching, his chest aching in a way he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about romance or attraction, not yet. It was about something deeper, about trust, about hope, about the quiet possibility that maybe, just maybe, life could still surprise him. The table had quieted down after the chaos, the twins still busy doodling cats and hearts on napkins. Graham leaned back, studying Sadie. She wasn't trying to fill the silence with small talk. She didn't check her phone or glance at the clock. She simply sat there, present, as though being in that moment with him and the girls was enough. Finally, Sadie rested her elbows lightly on the table. "You know," she began, her voice thoughtful, "I grew up in a house where money was, well, tight would be the polite word." Graham raised his eyes, listening carefully. Sadie's smile was faint, touched with memory. "The lights went out more times than I can count. But my mom, she had books, stacks of them, on every shelf, under the bed, even piled up in the kitchen. She used to read to me by candlelight when the power was off. That's how I fell in love with stories." Her eyes softened. "Books made me feel rich, even when we had nothing else. That's why I became a librarian, to give kids that same feeling, to remind them that even if the world is tough, imagination is free." Graham's chest tightened. There was no envy in her voice, no bitterness, just gratitude. Quiet, genuine gratitude for what she had been given. He thought about his past dates, the ones who asked about his house in Aspen, his collection of wines, the number of cars in his garage. They wanted the man on magazine covers, not the man sitting here now with sauce on his shirt and juice-stained jeans. But Sadie, she hadn't asked a single question about his job, his money, or his status. She cared about who he was in this moment. "You must love your job," he said finally. Sadie nodded, her smile warming. "I do. The kids who come after school, their faces light up when I remember their names, or when I save a book I know they'll love. It might seem small, but those small things matter." She tilted her head. "At least I like to think they do." Before Graham could reply, Lily leaned her head against Sadie's arm, her stuffed bunny squished between them. "You're nice," she whispered sleepily. Sadie blinked, her eyes glistening for just a second before she brushed a crumb off Lily's cheek. "These girls," she whispered, almost to herself, "are something special." Graham swallowed hard, his throat thick. He wanted to say, "They're my whole world." He wanted to say, "Thank you for seeing them." But the words stuck in his chest. Instead, he just looked at Sadie. And in that moment, for the first time in years, he felt truly seen himself. 4 days passed. 4 long days since Graham had folded that napkin drawing, a crooked little cat with too many whiskers, and the words Sadie plus Ella scrawled in uneven letters, and tucked it into his glove box. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she laughed with the girls, how she paid the bill without hesitation, how she made a messy dinner feel like the most natural thing in the world. Every night as he tucked Lily and Lucy into bed, they asked the same question. "Daddy, will we see Miss Sadie again?" And every night, Graham gave the same answer, his voice caught somewhere between honesty and hope. Maybe. By Saturday morning, he couldn't take it anymore. He had nothing but one small clue, something Sadie had said almost in passing. "I work at the library near Pine Street, the one with the red doors." So, he packed the twins into the car and drove. He told himself it was just curiosity, just a simple visit to check out some books. But his pounding heart said otherwise. The red doors were easy to spot, bright against the old brick building. Inside, the scent of polished wood and paper wrapped around them like a familiar blanket.
Children sat cross-legged in a corner, laughter echoing softly through the rows of shelves. And there she was, Sadie, in a soft cardigan, a picture book open on her lap. Her voice rose and fell theatrically as she read, making the kids giggle and gasp at just the right moments. Lily's hand shot up instantly. "Daddy, that's her!"
Jacket pockets. Her eyes widened. The silence between them was deafening. She closed the book gently, setting it aside as the other kids began to chatter. "You," she whispered when he stepped closer. "You were supposed to meet someone else that night." Graham nodded, his throat dry. "I was." Sadie crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "Then why did you stay?" He took a slow breath, his voice low and steady. "Because I couldn't walk away. Not when, for the first time in years, someone finally saw me. Not Westwood, the CEO, not the guy with headlines and wealth, just me. A dad, trying to keep it together." Sadie swallowed. Her eyes flickered briefly toward the twins, who were now flipping through picture books nearby. She pressed her lips together. "So, what now?" Graham hesitated, then let out a nervous laugh. "I don't know. I just knew I couldn't let you disappear without telling you the truth. Not because I think it changes anything, but because you deserve to know." Sadie looked down at the napkin drawing one of the twins had handed her, the crooked cat with a pink heart drawn over its head. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held it. Something in her expression softened. Maybe it wasn't an answer yet, but it wasn't rejection either. In the days that followed their unexpected reunion at the library, life began to shift in small, almost unnoticeable ways. Graham found himself making excuses to stop by Pine Street more often, sometimes to return a book, other times just to let the twins sit cross-legged at story time. Each time, Sadie would glance up, her lips curving into a smile that she tried to hide, but never quite could. The twins adored her. They would race down the library steps, calling her name, tugging on her hands, showing her their latest crayon drawings, and Sadie never turned them away. She listened, laughed, and leaned into their world as if she had always belonged there. One afternoon, Graham invited her to the cottage on the edge of town, a modest, quiet place he had kept unchanged since his wife's passing. Flower pots lined the porch, and inside the living room walls were plastered with the twins' artwork. Sadie walked through the door and stopped, smiling softly at the sea of paper hearts and stick figures taped everywhere. "You weren't kidding," she said, laughing gently. "This house is a gallery." The girls beamed with pride. "We made them all," Lucy declared. That night, dinner was simple spaghetti by popular demand. They ate at the old wooden table, mismatched chairs creaking beneath them, and when dessert came, the twins insisted Sadie sit between them. Graham stood at the sink, drying dishes, his chest tightening at the sight. The girls leaned against Sadie as if she had always been part of their family. Later, as the evening light faded, Sadie tucked the girls into bed with a storybook. Lucy's eyes fluttered shut first, then Lily whispered softly, "Miss Sadie? Can I call you Mama Sadie?" The room stilled. Graham froze in the doorway, hardly daring to breathe. Sadie's eyes filled with tears as she leaned closer, brushing back Lily's curls. "If that's what you want, sweetheart, then yes, of course you can." Graham's throat tightened as he turned away, blinking back emotion. Weeks passed, and what began as quiet visits grew into something steadier. Sadie organized a reading program for local schools, and Graham supported her quietly, never stealing the spotlight. He let her lead, watching her shine in her own right. Slowly, the whispers about the mystery librarian faded, replaced with headlines about the program's impact. But at home, away from the noise, life was simple. Walks in the park, grocery store trips where the twins fought over who got to push the cart, evenings filled with crayons and laughter. One spring afternoon in the backyard of the cottage, Graham set the old table with mismatched chairs, the same table from the night they met. Sadie smiled when she saw it. "You brought back the wrong table," she teased. "Some mistakes," Graham said, taking her hand, "are worth keeping." He took a deep breath, his voice steady. Sadie Quinn, I'm not asking for headlines or grand ceremonies, just this. Be you with us. Be the heart of this home. Will you marry me? Sadie laughed through tears, slipping the simple ring onto her finger. We've been a family for a while now. You're just catching up. The twins squealed, hugging her tightly, their giggles filling the yard. And in that moment, Graham realized the truth. Love doesn't always arrive with perfect timing. Sometimes it shows up in spilled juice, crooked drawings, and laughter around a messy table. Sometimes it sits at the wrong dinner and ends up turning your world right